My husband called me disgusting for my body. The next morning, I signed the sale of his mansion for $7.5 million. I never thought that the words of someone I had loved for 20 years would be the ones to give me back my dignity. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. You'll be helping me to continue unburdening myself. My name is Carol. I'm 64 years old. And until 3 months ago, I lived in a stone mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, with gardens that I tended to myself every dawn. That October morning, the air smelled of withered jasmine as I descended the marble staircase I had polished for 2 decades. My slippers brushed softly against the steps as I headed to the kitchen, just as I had every morning since I married Edward. The routine was always the same. Freshly ground coffee at 7:30, toast with extra virgin olive oil I bought at the local farmer's market, and fresh squeezed orange juice from the same juicer my mother gave me when I got married. Edward would come down at exactly 8, impeccable in his Armani suit, his silver hair perfectly combed back, and that scent of expensive cologne that I bought him every Christmas at Saks Fifth Avenue. That morning, while stirring scrambled eggs in the cast-iron skillet, I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I smiled automatically, a habit so ingrained over the years I didn't even notice it anymore. It was the kind of smile that becomes a muscle, that appears without thought when you hear the person you love approaching. "Good morning, darling," I said, turning to him with the steaming plate in my hands. "I made your eggs just how you like them, with a little prosciutto." Edward stopped at the kitchen's threshold. His gray eyes, which once seemed to me the color of the sea in winter, scanned me from head to toe with an expression I didn't recognize. I was wearing my pale blue cotton robe, the same one I wore every morning, with little embroidered flowers I had stitched myself years ago. My graying hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and I wore no makeup because it would be hours before he returned from work. "Could you please do me a favor and get properly dressed?" he said, his tone as cold as a blade piercing through me. "You look like something dragged out of a dumpster. With that body, frankly, you're disgusting." The plate slipped from my hands. The sound of porcelain shattering against the terracotta floor mixed with the crashing I felt in my chest. The eggs scattered across the floor, staining the tiles I had so carefully scrubbed the night before. What did you say?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You heard me," he repeated, pouring coffee into his favorite cup, the fine china one we had bought together on our trip to London. "You're not 20 anymore, Carol. At your age, the least you could do is take care of yourself a little. Don't expect me to look at you with the same eyes." He sat at the table as if nothing had happened, unfolded his copy of the Wall Street Journal, and began to read the business section while I just stood there, surrounded by broken glass, my heart shattering inside my chest. My hands trembled as I picked up the porcelain fragments. Each piece I lifted from the floor seemed to carry away a small part of the 20 years we had built together. I remembered when we bought that dinnerware set on Madison Avenue. Shortly after we moved into that house, Edward had insisted it be of the highest quality because a house like ours deserves the best. I had agreed, proud that we could afford such luxuries after years of hard work. "Don't just stand there gawking," he added without looking up from his paper. "Clean it up properly. The housekeeper will be here later and she'll think we're slobs." I knelt on the cold floor, picking up the pieces one by one, feeling tears begin to cloud my vision. 20 years. 20 years serving breakfasts, preparing dinners, caring for that house as if it were a temple, waiting for him every night with a hot meal and a smile. 20 years sleeping by his side, comforting him when business was bad, celebrating his successes as if they were my own. Edward kept reading, oblivious to my pain as I finished cleaning. When I was done, I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of my 64 years in every joint. "I'm going to take a shower," I announced in a thread of a voice. "Good idea," he replied without looking at me. "And put on something decent for when I get back tonight. I have an important meeting with some Japanese clients, and we might stop by the house for a drink." I climbed the stairs, holding onto the banister, each step a mountain to conquer. In the bathroom mirror, I met a woman I no longer recognized. Deep, dark circles, wrinkles that had deepened without my noticing, hair grayer than I remembered. But it wasn't my appearance that hurt. It was the look in my eyes. It was that expression of defeat that had been growing there without my realizing it. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried in silence, because after so many years, even my way of crying had become discreet, invisible, as if my pain was also an inconvenience to be hidden. That afternoon, while waiting for him to return, I began to remember. I didn't want to, but the memories came like an avalanche I could no longer stop. I sat on the Italian leather sofa in the living room, the one we had bought when Edward landed his first major contract, and the images began to parade through my mind like yellowed photographs. I remembered when we met at a lawyers' conference at the St. Regis Hotel. I was working as a secretary at a small firm in the East Village, and he had just opened his own practice. He was ambitious, smart, and made me feel like the most beautiful woman in the world when he invited me to dinner at Keen's Steakhouse. He told me his dreams, his plans to build a legal empire, and I fell in love not only with him, but with the idea of being part of something great. During the first years of our marriage, we were a team. I quit my job to support him fully, managing his schedule, attending to his clients when they came to the house, and organizing the business dinners that were key to his professional growth. I mortgaged my small apartment on the Upper West Side to help him finance the expansion of his firm. "It's an investment in our future," he would tell me, and I believed him. When we bought the mansion in Greenwich, I put all my savings toward the down payment. Money I had inherited from my parents, who had worked their entire lives in a small fabric shop on the Lower East Side. Edward promised my name would be on the deed, that everything we built would be ours. But when it came time to sign, he convinced me it was better to put everything in his company's name for tax purposes. "Trust me, Carol. I'm a lawyer. I know what I'm doing," he assured me. And I trusted him, as always. I remembered the sleepless nights when he was studying to become a partner at the most prestigious law firm in New York. I would bring him coffee, make him sandwiches, and stay up until 3 in the morning massaging his shoulders as he reviewed cases. When he finally made it, the celebration was at the Ritz-Carlton, surrounded by his important colleagues and clients. In the photographs from that night, I always appeared one step behind him, smiling discreetly, like an elegant shadow complementing his success. The sacrifices piled up without my noticing. I stopped seeing my friends because Edward needed me to be available for his social commitments. I gave up my hobbies, like the painting classes at the Community Arts Center, because they conflicted with his gym schedule and someone had to be home to take his important calls. I even stopped talking about my own dreams, because every conversation revolved around his achievements, his goals, his needs. My sister Susan used to tell me, "Carol, you're slowly erasing yourself," but I wouldn't listen. I thought that was what good wives did, that love meant disappearing so the other person could shine. The small cruelties began so gradually that I didn't recognize them as such. First, it was comments about my clothes. "Don't you have something more elegant for this dinner?" Then about the way I spoke. "Let me handle the important conversations, Carol." Then about my appearance. "You should go to the gym more often. That hairstyle ages you. Don't you think you're eating too much?" Each comment was small, seemingly harmless, said with a smile that made me doubt whether it was truly cruel or if I was just being too sensitive. I adapted, changed myself, trying to be the woman he wanted me to be, not realizing that in the process, I was losing the woman I was. This morning, with the eggs scattered on the floor and his words still burning in my throat, I finally saw it clearly. It hadn't been love. It had been a slow erosion of my soul, a controlled demolition of my self-esteem, a process so subtle that I hadn't noticed until it was already too late. The following days were a silent torture. Edward continued his routine as if nothing had happened, but I could no longer ignore the signs I had previously overlooked or justified. The way he constantly checked his phone, how he had started going to the gym after years of being sedentary, the new shirts that appeared in his closet that I didn't remember buying. One morning, while he was in the shower, a call came through on the house landline. It was strange, as we usually only used that number for formal calls or emergencies. "Hello?" I answered. "Is Edward there?" a female voice asked, which I recognized immediately. It was Sophia. "He's busy," I replied, feeling the blood rush to my head. "Oh, Is this Carol? Her voice changed, becoming colder. Just tell him Sophia called. It's about yesterday's work. She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there, holding the receiver, feeling a mix of humiliation and rage I had never experienced before. How dare that woman call my home? And how dare Edward give her our personal number? When he came out of the bathroom, I said in the calmest voice I could manage, Sophia called for you. She said it's about yesterday's work. Edward tensed for a moment but quickly regained his composure. Ah, yes. We had some loose ends to tie up with the Japanese contract, he said, drying his hair with a towel. I'll call her later from the office. That same afternoon, I decided to take a walk at the mall in White Plains. I needed air. I needed to be around people. I needed to feel that a world existed beyond the walls of that house that was increasingly feeling like a prison. While having a coffee on the Starbucks patio, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Edward and Sophia were walking together through the main corridor, laughing, completely at ease. He was wearing the leather jacket I had given him for his birthday last year, and she was hanging on his arm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I saw them go into a lingerie store together. My Edward, the man who for months had been telling me he didn't have the money to fix the house's heating system, was buying underwear for his mistress. I hid behind a pillar, feeling my legs tremble. I watched them for 20 minutes, seeing him kiss her gently on the forehead, how she caressed his cheek, how they looked like a perfect couple who had been together for years. When they finally separated, she headed towards the parking garage, and he went to the electronics section. I followed him at a distance, keeping several yards between us. I watched him buy a new phone, the latest model iPhone that cost over $1,000. When the clerk asked if he wanted to sign up for a new line, Edward nodded. A second phone, to talk to her without me finding out. I returned home before him, my heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I sat in the kitchen, pretending to read a magazine when I heard his car in the driveway. He came in whistling, in an excellent mood with a small bag in his hand. How was your day? He asked, kissing my cheek as if he were the most loving husband in the world. Fine, I replied. I went for a walk around White Plains. I saw his face tense slightly, but he recovered quickly. That's nice, darling. You need to get out more. He placed the bag on the counter. I bought some vitamins at the pharmacy. The doctor says I'm low on iron. Lies. It was all lies. That night during dinner, I couldn't help but ask, Edward, are you happy with me? He looked up from his plate, surprised by the question. Why do you ask that? Just curious. We've been together for 20 years, and sometimes I feel like we don't really see each other anymore. Edward put his fork down and gave me the look he used when someone asked him an uncomfortable question in the courtroom. Carol, I think you're going through one of those crises women your age have. Maybe you should see a doctor, get your hormones checked. It's not a hormonal crisis, Edward. It's a simple question. Look, he said, getting up from the table. I'm tired of these dramatic conversations. If you have a problem with me, tell me clearly. If not, let's stop going around in circles about things that don't make sense. He went to the living room to watch TV, leaving me alone with the dirty dishes and a feeling of emptiness that filled my entire chest. That was his answer. After 20 years of marriage, my question about our happiness was just unnecessary drama to him. That night, while he slept, I went down to his study. I knew it was an invasion of his privacy, but I no longer cared. Among his papers, I found something that made me tremble. A draft of divorce papers he had been preparing with another lawyer, not our trusted one. The document specified that he would get the house, the car, the bank accounts, and the company. I would leave with my personal belongings and an alimony payment of $500 a month for 2 years. $500. The price Edward had put on 20 years of my life. The document was dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks during which he had continued to live with me as if nothing was wrong, kissing me in the morning, letting me cook for him, wash his clothes, and keep his house immaculate, all while planning to dispose of me like trash. On the second page, I found something even worse. A sworn statement where Edward claimed I had never contributed financially to the marriage, that I had been completely supported by him all these years. According to this document, I was a burden he had carried out of kindness, a woman with no resources of her own who was completely dependent on his generosity. I sat in his leather chair, surrounded by his diplomas hanging on the walls, and for the first time in years, I felt something more powerful than sadness. I felt a cold, calculated fury that ran through me from head to toe. The next day, while Edward was at the office, I called our trusted lawyer, Mr. Morales, the same one who had drafted our joint will years ago. "Carol, what a surprise. How can I help you?" "I need to review some legal papers, Mr. Morales. It's urgent." "Of course. Have you spoken with Edward? He's usually the one who handles—" "No," I interrupted. "This time, I want to speak with you personally." That afternoon, I met with him in his office in Manhattan. I explained my situation without going into intimate details, but making it clear that I needed to know my legal rights in case of a divorce. "Carol, I'm afraid Edward is partially right," he told me after reviewing the documents. "The house is registered under his company's name, and technically you're not an official partner. However, there's something he seems to have overlooked." "What is it?" "The original mortgage documents. When you bought the house, you signed as a co-signer on the mortgage loan. That means you have rights to the property, especially considering you contributed 40% of the initial down payment." My heart began to beat faster. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that Edward cannot sell or mortgage the house without your consent, and in a divorce, you would be entitled to claim your proportional share of the initial investment." I left that office feeling different. For the first time in months, I didn't feel completely helpless. Edward had made a mistake by underestimating me, by thinking I was so ignorant in legal matters that I wouldn't notice his maneuvers. That night, during dinner, he announced casually, "By the way, darling, I've been thinking that maybe we should sell the house. The real estate market is great right now, and we could make a good investment by buying something smaller." I looked him straight in the eye. "Oh, really? And where do you propose we live in the meantime?" "Well, I have some ideas. We could rent temporarily, or—" He paused. "Maybe it's time for each of us to go our own way." There it was. He had finally brought it up. No drama, no explanations, like someone suggesting a different restaurant for dinner. "Are you talking about a divorce?" I asked in a calm voice. Edward shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Not necessarily a divorce. We could call it a temporary separation, so we both have space to think." "And the house?" "Well, since it's in the company's name, the logical thing would be for me to take care of it. You could look for something more suited to your needs." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. "Of course, Edward. I'll think about it." That night, while he slept peacefully, believing everything was going according to his plan, I stayed awake until dawn, but I wasn't crying. I was planning. The next morning, Edward got up earlier than usual. I heard him moving around the house with a different energy, as if he were in a hurry to start something important. When I went down to the kitchen, he had already made his own breakfast and was finishing up reading emails on his phone. "Good morning," I said, noticing he was wearing his best suit, the navy blue Hugo Boss he only wore for the most important occasions. "Morning," he replied without looking up. "I'm going to be very busy today. A key meeting with some foreign investors. Don't wait for me for lunch or dinner." "The same Japanese investors from the other day?" "No, other clients. From the real estate sector." He slipped his phone into his jacket's inner pocket. "By the way, an appraiser is coming this afternoon to see the house, just to get an updated valuation." My blood ran cold. An appraiser. He was moving forward with his plans much faster than I had imagined. "Don't you think we should talk about it first?" Edward turned to me with that condescending smile I knew so well. "Carol, darling, it's just numbers. To know what our investment is worth. It's nothing definitive." After he left, I immediately called Mr. Morales. "I need to see you today," I told him. "It's urgent." 2 hours later, I was sitting in his office, explaining the situation. "Carol, this changes things considerably," he said, after listening to me. "If Edward is moving this quickly, it's because he has a very specific plan. We need to act before he can execute any legal maneuver. What can I do? As a co-signer on the mortgage, you have the right to block any transaction on the property. But we need to be strategic." He leaned forward. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we take this step, there's no going back." For the first time in weeks, my voice was firm and decisive. I'm sure. That afternoon, promptly at 5, the appraiser arrived. He was an older man with a leather briefcase and a professional demeanor that put me at ease. As he walked through the house, I accompanied him, watching as he evaluated every room, every detail I had cared for over the years. "It's a magnificent property," he commented while measuring the main living room. "Very well maintained. You can tell it's been cared for with love." "Thank you," I replied. "I've lived here a long time. May I ask the reason for the appraisal? Are you thinking of selling?" I hesitated for a moment before answering. "My husband is considering the possibility, but I'm not convinced yet." The appraiser nodded understandingly. "It's a big decision. A house like this, in this area, is worth around $7.5 million in the current market. It's not something to be taken lightly. $7.5 million. The figure resonated in my head for the rest of the afternoon. It was much more money than we had originally paid. The investment I had made with my parents' inheritance had multiplied considerably. When Edward returned that night, he was euphoric. He was whistling as he took off his jacket, and he had that satisfied smile he wore when he closed a good deal. "How did the meeting go?" I asked. "Better than expected," he replied, pouring himself a glass of scotch. "These investors are very interested in luxury properties in Greenwich. They say it's an area with a lot of potential for appreciation." He sat next to me on the sofa, more relaxed than I had seen him in months. "By the way, did the appraiser come?" "Yes. He says the house is worth $7.5 million. Edward smiled broadly. "Perfect. More than I expected." He took a sip of his scotch. "Carol, I think it's the perfect time to sell. With that money, we could do so many things, start over, each with our own share." "Our own share?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Well, obviously. You'd get your corresponding share too. Let's say 20% would be fair, don't you think? After all, I've been the one maintaining the house all these years, paying the mortgage, the taxes, the repairs. 20%. Of the $7.5 million, he was offering me $1.5 million when I had put in a substantial portion for the initial purchase and had contributed to its upkeep for 2 decades. "That seems generous of you," I said, containing my fury. "I knew you'd understand." He patted my knee as if I were a good little girl. "I'll talk to my lawyer tomorrow to start the paperwork. These things take time, but if all goes well, we can close the deal in a couple of months." That night, while he slept soundly, I made a decision that would change everything. I got up quietly, went down to his study, and took pictures with my phone of all the documents I had found: the divorce draft, the false statements about my financial contribution, the company papers, everything. The next day, early in the morning, I called Mr. Chu Morales and emailed him all the photos. "Carol," he said when we met that afternoon, "this is evidence of intent to commit fraud. Edward is trying to strip you of assets that legally belong to you. We have solid grounds to act. What do I need to do? We're going to immediately block any transaction on the property, and we're going to initiate a separation of assets process that protects your interests. But Carol, I need you to understand something. This is going to be a war. Edward is not going to accept this peacefully. I understand. Are you prepared for the consequences?" For the first time in 20 years, I felt completely certain of a decision. I'm more than prepared. The next few days were strange. Edward continued with his normal routine, not suspecting that I knew everything about his plans. I watched him get ready in the mornings, listened to his phone calls, observed how he constantly checked his messages with Sophia, and I felt like I was watching a play where I was the only one who knew the real ending. On Wednesday afternoon, while he was at the office, I received a call from Mr. Morales. "Carol, it's all set. The documents have been filed with the court. As of tomorrow morning, Edward will not be able to make any transaction on the house without your express, notarized consent. When will he find out?" "His lawyer will receive the notification first thing tomorrow. I estimate Edward will know before noon." That night, I cooked his favorite dinner, filet mignon with a whiskey sauce and potatoes au gratin. I served it on our best china, lit candles, and put on soft music. Edward arrived in a very good mood, as he had been these past few days, completely oblivious to what was coming. "What are we celebrating?" he asked, noticing the special effort. "Nothing in particular. I just wanted to make you a special dinner." Throughout the meal, he talked excitedly about his future plans. He told me about an apartment he had seen in downtown Manhattan, perfect for a successful bachelor. He talked about his travel plans, how he was going to use his newfound freedom to do all the things marriage had prevented him from doing. I nodded, smiled, poured him more wine, all while listening to him plan my removal from his life with the same enthusiasm other people plan a vacation. "Carol," he said towards the end of dinner, taking my hand across the table, "I want you to know that I hold no resentment towards you. You've been a good wife, within your limitations. It's just that, well, life is short, and I think we both deserve to be happy." "Of course, Edward. We both deserve to be happy. I'm glad you see it that way. I thought you were going to put up more of a fight." "Why would I fight it? If you're not happy with me, the best thing is for each of us to go our own way." Edward smiled, clearly relieved. "I knew you'd understand in the end. You've always been an intelligent woman." That night, we made love for the last time. Or rather, he made love to me for the last time. Because for me, it was just the final act of a goodbye. I stayed awake afterward, looking at his relaxed face in the darkness, memorizing every detail of the man with whom I had shared half my life, knowing that by the next day, everything would have changed forever. At 9 the next morning, Edward's phone started ringing insistently. It was his lawyer. From the kitchen, I heard his voice gradually rise in tone, moving from confusion to disbelief, and finally to fury. "What do you mean I can't sell? It's my house, my company." A long pause. "Carol signed what? When?" Another, longer pause. "That's impossible. She doesn't know anything about the law." I heard his hurried footsteps coming down the stairs. When he appeared in the kitchen, his face was completely transformed. There was nothing left of the relaxed, smiling man from the night before. "Carol," he said, in a voice that tried to remain calm but trembled with rage, "we need to talk." Edward stormed into the kitchen like a wounded bull. His face had completely lost the composed demeanor of a successful lawyer that he maintained even in the worst circumstances. His gray eyes now blazed with a fury I had never seen in him, not even in our worst arguments. "What the hell have you done?" he yelled, slamming his phone down on the marble countertop. I turned slowly from the coffee maker, with a calmness that surprised even me. "Good morning, Edward. Would you like some coffee?" "Don't give me that crap!" His voice echoed through the kitchen. "My lawyer told me you filed some kind of motion, that you've blocked the sale of my house." "Our house," I corrected gently, pouring coffee into my favorite cup. "And I haven't filed a motion. I've simply exercised my legal rights as a co-signer on the mortgage." Edward fell silent for a few seconds, as if processing information that didn't fit his version of reality. "Co-signer? Carol, you don't understand any of this. Someone has been putting ideas in your head." "No one has been putting anything in my head, Edward. I simply consulted a lawyer about my rights to a property in which I invested a significant inheritance from my parents." "You didn't invest anything!" he exploded. "I paid for this house. I paid the mortgage for 20 years. Yes, with the money from my down payment. And you also paid for the new BMW, and the vacations in the Caribbean, and the apartment you plan to buy to live with Sophia." His mistress's name hung in the air like a bomb. Edward froze, his face turning from the red of anger to the white of panic. "What are you talking about? Who's Sophia?" "Edward, please. The interpreter for the Japanese clients. The woman you're planning to divorce me for. The same one I saw you with the other day in White Plains buying lingerie." He collapsed into one of the kitchen chairs, as if his legs could no longer support him. "Carol, I can explain." "There's no need," I said, sitting across from him. "I also found the draft of the divorce papers you've been preparing behind my back. The part where you claim I never contributed financially to this marriage was very interesting." Edward ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he made when he was desperate. "Listen to me," he said, switching his strategy to a calmer tone. "Yes, I know Sophia. Yes, we've had a relationship, but it's not what you think. It's just a midlife crisis, a temporary madness, a crisis that lasts for months, A madness that includes planning to throw me out of my own home? It's not your house, he exploded again. It's in my company's name. Legally, it's mine. Legally, Edward, I am a co-signer, and according to my lawyer, that gives me the right to veto any transaction. I stood up and poured myself more coffee. But don't worry. I've made a decision. His eyes lit up with hope. What decision? I'm going to sell the house. Edward exhaled in relief. Thank you, Carol. I knew you'd see reason in the end. We can split the money fairly and— I'm going to sell it, I interrupted, with my name on the sale, and with my corresponding 60% share, based on my initial investment and the improvements I've paid for over the years. The silence that followed was deafening. Edward stared at me as if I had spoken in a language he didn't understand. That's impossible. You can't do that. Of course I can. I've already spoken with a different, impartial appraiser. The house is indeed worth $7.5 million. My share, calculated proportionally, comes to $4.5 million. You're insane! I'll take you to court. This is extortion. Go ahead, I replied with astonishing calm. I have all the proof of my contributions, the receipts from my parents' inheritance, the wire transfers for the down payment, the payments for home improvements, all perfectly documented. Meanwhile, you'll have to explain to a judge why you attempted to defraud me with false statements. Edward shot up, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. You can't do this to me, Carol. After everything I've done for you, I gave you a home, a comfortable life. I supported you for 20 years. You supported me? The words came out with a bitter laugh. Edward, I paid for half of this house. I kept this home running. I sacrificed my career, my friendships, my very identity to build your success. And for the last few years, while you were sleeping with your secretary, I was still the perfect wife, waiting for you at home. You're so ungrateful, he shouted. For years I've had to put up with your mediocrity, your boring conversations, your lack of ambition. Everything we have is because of my work. Everything you have is thanks to my money and my sacrifice. But that ends today. I took a folder of documents from my purse and placed it on the table. Here are the asset separation papers. And here, I took out another document, is the sales contract for the house. I already have an interested buyer who can pay in cash. Edward opened the documents with trembling hands. This would leave me with nothing. The company is also mortgaged with this house as collateral. You'll have your 40% of the sale, $3 million. Enough to start over with Sophia. You can't ruin me over an affair. All men have affairs. You're not being ruined over an affair, Edward. You're being ruined for 20 years of manipulation, humiliation, and now attempted fraud. He slumped back into the chair, his head in his hands. Carol, please. We can fix this. I can leave Sophia. We can go to couples therapy. We can start over. Like the time you told me I was disgusting? Or when you told your clients that women of my generation were only good for being housewives. Or when you planned to kick me out of my own house without a penny. I was angry. People say things they don't mean when they're angry. Angry people speak their truth without a filter, Edward. And the truth is, you've spent years despising me, using me, and planning to discard me when I was no longer useful to you. Just then, the doorbell rang. Edward and I looked at each other. Are you expecting someone? He asked. Yes, I replied, standing up. The notary, to sign the sale. The color drained from Edward's face. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. I walked toward the door, but Edward grabbed my arm. Carol, wait. Don't do this. Think about all the good times we had. Our first years. How happy we were. I looked him straight in the eyes. Edward, for the last 2 years, you have made me feel invisible, ugly, stupid, and useless. You planned to steal everything that was mine and leave me on the curb like old furniture. I gently pulled my arm free. The good memories don't erase the betrayal. If you sign that sale, you will never see me again, he shouted in desperation. I'll leave with Sophia and you'll be alone forever. I stopped at the kitchen doorway and turned back to him one last time. Edward, promising to leave with your mistress isn't a threat. It's a gift. I opened the door to the notary, an older gentleman with a leather briefcase who greeted me politely. Behind him were the buyers, a young couple from Manhattan who had seen the house the day before and had fallen in love with it instantly. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," the notary greeted me. "Are you ready to proceed with the signing?" "Completely ready," I replied. As he spread the documents on the dining room table, I heard Edward on the phone in the kitchen, probably with his lawyer, his voice growing more desperate. The young couple walked through the house one last time, commenting enthusiastically on the gardens I had tended for so many years, on the decor I had chosen with such love, on the home I had built that would now belong to someone else. For a moment, a pang of nostalgia shot through my chest. But when I heard Edward yelling at someone on the phone about fucking feminists who don't know their place, the nostalgia vanished completely. I signed each document with a steady hand, my new single name, Carol Vance, shining in blue ink on every page. When we finished, the notary handed me the certified check for $7.5 million. "It has been a pleasure, Ms. Vance," he said, shaking my hand. "Enjoy your new chapter." Edward appeared in the living room just as the buyers and the notary were leaving. "Carol," he said, his voice cracking, "you just sold our life." "No, Edward," I replied, carefully placing the check in my purse. "I just bought mine back." The following days were an emotional roller coaster that took me from the euphoria of victory to the harsh reality of what I had done. Edward had left that same night, after hastily packing a suitcase and throwing me a look of hatred that chilled my blood. His last words before slamming the door were, "This isn't over, Carol. You'll regret this for the rest of your life." I was left alone in that enormous house, surrounded by moving boxes that the new owners had started to bring, feeling a strange mix of freedom and terror. For the first time in 20 years, no one was waiting for me at home. No one would ask me for dinner. No one would criticize my appearance or make me feel like I wasn't enough. But also, no one would wish me good morning or share the small routines that had shaped my days for so long. The first call came the next day. It was my sister-in-law, Patricia, Edward's sister, with that sharp, arrogant voice that had always put me on edge. "Carol, what have you done? Edward is devastated." He told me what happened. "Hello, Patricia," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I imagine Edward gave you his version of events." "His version? Carol, you sold the house out of spite. Like a scorned, vengeful woman. Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" "What I'm ashamed of is having put up with 20 years of humiliation to keep a family together that never respected me." "Edward supported you. He gave you a life you could never have had on your own." "Edward supported himself with my money, Patricia, and now he'll have to learn to stand on his own 2 feet. You're a what? A woman who stood up for herself? A wife who refused to be robbed? Say it, Patricia." She hung up without another word. The next calls came from mutual friends, or rather, the wives of Edward's colleagues, all with the same tone of reproach disguised as concern. "Carol, dear, we're so worried about you." "Carol, don't you think you've been a bit dramatic?" "Carol, Edward is a good man. All marriages go through crises." The one that hurt the most was the call from Meredith, who had been my closest friend for the past 10 years. I met her at the Christmas parties for Edward's firm, and we had developed what I thought was a genuine friendship. "Carol, honey," she said in that sweet voice she used when she wanted to convince someone of something, "I understand you're hurt, but don't you think you've gone too far? Edward came over last night crying like a child. He says he's willing to give up everything to get back with you." "Give up everything?" I asked. "Does he mean give up Sophia?" There was an uncomfortable silence. "Carol, men sometimes make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. Meredith, if your husband cheated on you for months, planned to steal your house, and called you disgusting in front of other men, would you give him another chance? That's different." "No, Meredith, it's exactly the same. It's just easier to ask another woman to forgive when it happens to her." "Carol, you're going to end up alone. Have you thought about that? At our age, finding someone else is practically impossible. I'd rather be alone than in bad company." "You say that now, but in a year, when you see Edward rebuilding his life with that girl, you're going to regret it." After I hung up, I sat in the empty kitchen, surrounded by cardboard boxes, wondering if Meredith was right. Would I regret it? Was the fear of loneliness worse than constant humiliation? That afternoon, while packing my books, I found a photo that had fallen behind the bookshelf. It was from our 5th wedding anniversary. Edward and I were on a beach in the Hamptons, smiling at the camera, our hair messy from the wind and our cheeks red from the sun. We looked so young, so in love, so certain that our love would last forever. I stared at that photograph for a long time, remembering the woman I had been then. Carol Vance, 44 years old, full of dreams and plans, convinced she had found the perfect man. What would that Carol have said to me if she had known what awaited her? Would she have warned me? Or would she have been as blinded by love as I was for so many years? The answer came when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Vance? This is Sophia. I think we should talk. My first reaction was to hang up, but something in her voice, a note of urgency that wasn't aggressive but almost scared, it made me stay on the line. What do you want? I asked. I need to tell you something about Edward. Something I think you should know. We arranged to meet an hour later at a cafe near Central Park. It was strange, walking to that meeting, knowing I was going to come face to face with the woman who had been instrumental in the destruction of my marriage. Sophia was younger than I had estimated, probably no older than 28. She was beautiful, yes, but when I saw her up close, I noticed something I hadn't perceived from a distance. There was fear in her eyes, and something else. Something that felt familiar because I had seen it in my own mirror for years. "Thank you for coming," she said when I sat across from her. "I know this must be very uncomfortable for you. What did you want to tell me?" Sophia took a deep breath before speaking. "Edward lied to me. He told me you had been separated for months, that you were only living together for legal reasons. He told me you knew about us, and that you were okay with it. And you believed him?" "Yes," she replied, looking down. "I'm an idiot, I know. But he can be very convincing when he wants to be. Why are you telling me this now?" Sophia looked me straight in the eye. "Because after you sold the house, Edward became different. Aggressive. Last night he came to my apartment drunk, screaming that it was all my fault, that because of me he had lost everything, that a slut like me wasn't worth what he had sacrificed. I felt a pang of something akin to compassion. Did he hurt you? Not physically, but the things he said. Carol, I don't think he ever really loved me. I think he was just using me to hurt you." "Why do you think that?" "Because when I told him we could go to another country together, start over with his share of the money from the house, he laughed. He told me I had been an amusement, a way to feel young again, but that he had never seriously planned to leave his life for me." Sophia's words hit me in an unexpected way. There was no pain in hearing them, but something like relief. Edward hadn't destroyed our marriage for love of another woman. He had destroyed it because he was a profoundly selfish and cruel man, capable of using both his wife and his mistress to satisfy his own needs. "Do you know what the saddest part of all this is, Sophia?" I said. "That neither you nor I were special to him. We were just useful." Sophia nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry for what happened, Carol. If I had known the truth, don't apologize for being deceived by the same man who deceived me for 20 years. As we left the cafe, Sophia said something that stuck with me. "Edward once told me that women like you were easy to manage because you had given up on dreaming, that once a woman stopped dreaming of something better, she became malleable." That night, in my temporary room in a hotel in Midtown, I lay awake thinking about those words. When had I stopped dreaming? At what point had I traded my dreams for the comfort of a life I thought was secure? I remembered that before I met Edward, I wanted to travel through Europe, learn French, maybe study art history. I remembered that I had plans to open a small gallery, that I loved photography, that I dreamed of writing a book someday. What had happened to that Carol? When had she decided that Edward's dreams were more important than her own? But as I asked myself these questions, I realized something extraordinary. For the first time in decades, I had the freedom to dream again. I had money, time, and above all, I had 64 years of experience that had taught me exactly what I did not want in my life. I took a notebook from the nightstand drawer and wrote on the first page, "The Dreams of Carol Vance, Part 2. Art?" And for the first time in months, I truly smiled. 3 weeks after selling the house, I was sitting on the terrace of a small apartment I had rented in the East Village, the same neighborhood where I had lived when I was young, before I met Edward. From my balcony, I could see the bustle of the street below, the young people walking up and down with shopping bags, the couples kissing on corners without a care in the world. For the first time in 20 years, I had no obligations. There was no one waiting for me for lunch, no one to ask what they wanted for dinner, no one whose mood would dictate my own. The silence of my new life was strange, almost deafening after so long serving the rhythms of another person. That morning, I had done something I couldn't remember ever doing. I stayed in bed until 11, reading a novel by Isabel Allende that I had bought the day before at a bookstore in Chelsea. Then I made myself an elaborate breakfast, eggs Benedict, French press coffee, pomegranate juice, and ate it slowly, savoring every bite while reading the news on the iPad I had just bought myself. It was amazing how the simplest things could feel revolutionary when you did them just for yourself. My phone rang, interrupting the morning's peace. It was an unknown number. Ms. Vance? This is Julia from World Roots Travel. We're calling about the inquiry you made yesterday regarding the trip to Tuscany. The day before, while walking down Broadway, I had seen an agency with a sign that read, Tours for Independent Women. Small groups, big adventures. On a whim, I had gone in and asked about their packages to Italy. Yes, of course. What can you tell me? We have a group leaving next week. It's 8 women, all traveling solo, ages between 45 and 70, 15 days touring Florence, Siena, and small Tuscan villages. It includes cooking classes, winery tours, and free time to explore on your own. Cooking classes? Yes, with a local chef in her own home. You'll learn to make fresh pasta, risottos, authentic tiramisu. It's a very popular experience with our clients. After hanging up, I sat on the balcony, thinking about the conversation. 10 years ago, when Edward and I had traveled to Italy for his lawyer's conference, I had mentioned that I would love to take an Italian cooking class. What for? He had said. You already cook well enough. Besides, we'd be wasting time we could be using to network with important people in the industry. Now, for the first time in decades, I could cook Italian pasta without having to justify it to anyone. That afternoon, I decided to walk through my new neighborhood. The East Village had changed a lot since I was young, but it still had that creative energy I had always loved. I stopped in front of a small art gallery exhibiting black and white photographs of New York in the 1980s. The images immediately transported me back to my youth, when I walked these same streets dreaming of being a photographer. Do you like them? A voice asked from behind me. I turned to see a woman about my age, with short, purple-dyed hair and a warm smile. They're beautiful, I replied. They remind me of when I used to live around here. Were you a photographer? I was, or I tried to be, a long time ago. And what happened? The question was simple, but it made me reflect. Life, I finally answered. I got married, other priorities. You know how it is. The woman nodded in understanding. I'm Elena, she introduced herself. This is my gallery. If you ever want to get back into photography, I run workshops for women who want to reconnect with their forgotten passions. Elena gave me her card, and when I got home that night, I put it on the fridge next to the brochure for the trip to Tuscany. In the following days, I established a new routine that made me feel like I was rediscovering who I was without Edward. I woke up when my body told me to, ate breakfast while reading books I had wanted to read for years, walked through Central Park feeding the ducks, and went to the movies in the afternoons to see films Edward would have considered boring or pretentious. One morning, while having coffee at a cafe in Washington Square Park, I saw a scene that made me smile. An older woman, perhaps in her 70s, was sitting alone at the next table, reading a thick book and taking notes in a journal. She was wearing a bright yellow dress and long earrings that sparkled in the sun. Every so often, I would look up from my book to watch the people passing by, with a smile of genuine curiosity. It reminded me of my grandmother, who always said that curiosity was what kept the spirit young. Excuse me, I said. What are you reading? Italian art history, she answered with enthusiasm. I'm preparing for a trip to Rome next month. At 70, I've decided to study everything I couldn't when I was younger. Are you going alone? Of course. It's the best way to travel. No one tells you what time to get up, which museum to visit, or how long to stand staring at a piece of art. We ended up chatting for an hour. Her name was Beatrice. She had been an elementary school teacher for 40 years and had gotten divorced at 65. I was scared at first, she confessed. 40 years married to a man who constantly told me I was nothing without him. But you know what I discovered? That without him, I am exactly who I always wanted to be. That conversation gave me the final courage I needed. That same afternoon, I called the travel agency. Julia, this is Carol Vance. I want to book the trip to Tuscany. Perfect. Do you have any questions about the itinerary? Just one. Is it a problem if I've never traveled alone before? Julia laughed softly. Ms. Vance, 80% of our clients had never traveled alone before coming with us. That's precisely why we exist. A week later, I was at JFK Airport with a new suitcase I had bought especially for the occasion. It was the first time in 20 years I was taking a plane without Edward, the first time I was going to a place he hadn't chosen, for reasons he hadn't approved of. At the boarding gate, I met my travel companions. There was a retired doctor from Boston named Martha, who had just finished chemotherapy and wanted to celebrate her recovery, a lawyer from Chicago named Helen, who had divorced after discovering her husband had a second family, and an artist from Santa Fe named Rose, who at 60 had decided to sell her house and travel the world. We all had different stories, but we shared something fundamental. We had decided it was never too late to start over. The flight to Florence was turbulent, but I didn't feel scared. I felt excited, nervous, alive in a way I hadn't remembered feeling in years. When we landed in Italy, Martha, the doctor from Boston, said to me, "Carol, you have a beautiful smile. Do you know you haven't stopped smiling since we met back in New York?" I hadn't realized it, but she was right. That first night in Florence, from the window of my room in a small hotel near the Ponte Vecchio, I wrote in my journal, "Dear 44-year-old Carol, today, after 20 years, I felt like you again, curious, brave, full of desire to discover new things. Edward was right about one thing. I am no longer the woman he knew. I'm better." The next day, during our first cooking class at the home of Nonna Giulia, an 80-year-old Italian woman teaching us to make ravioli from scratch, I realized something extraordinary. My hands, which for so many years had trembled with nerves when Edward criticized me, now worked the dough with confidence and grace. "Bravissima!" the Nonna exclaimed when she tasted my first creation. "You have the hands of an artist." That evening, dining with my new friends in a hidden trattoria known only to locals, we toasted to our new beginnings. "To the women who learned it's never too late to be happy," said Helen, the lawyer. "To discovering that being alone can be freedom," added Martha. "To Carol," said Rose, the artist, "who has taught us that selling a house can be the first step to buying a new life." When they raised their glasses to me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Pride. Pride in having had the courage to stand up for myself, for choosing dignity over comfort, for betting on myself when everyone told me I was making a mistake. That night, under the Tuscan stars, with my stomach full of food I had prepared with my own hands and my heart full of genuine friendship, I understood something fundamental. My life hadn't ended when Edward left me. My life had begun when I decided to leave the version of myself that he had created. 6 months after my return from Italy, I was sitting on the terrace of my new photography studio in the East Village, editing the images for my first solo exhibition. The photographs were portraits of women over 60 who, like me, had decided to reinvent themselves after a major life change. Elena, the gallery owner, had suggested the project after seeing the photos I had taken on my travels. Rebirth at 60 would be the name of the exhibition, and it was opening next week. My phone buzzed with a message from Martha, my friend from the Tuscany trip. "Carol, I just saw the article about your exhibition in the New York Times. I'm so proud. See you at the opening." The article had come out that morning. A small review in the arts section that talked about how a 64-year-old woman had rediscovered her passion for photography after a late-in-life divorce. The journalist had been very respectful, focusing on the art more than my personal story, but I couldn't help but smile when I read the line, "Vance proves that creativity has no expiration date." That afternoon, I had a special appointment. After months of hearing nothing from Edward, I had received a call from him the previous week. His voice sounded different, smaller, as if something inside him had broken. "Carol, I need to see you. please. It's important. We had arranged to meet at a cafe near Union Square, a neutral spot we had been to a few times during our first years of marriage. I arrived on time, at 5 in the afternoon. Edward was already there, sitting at a table in the back, and when I saw him, I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost weight, a lot of weight, and he had deep, dark circles that aged him considerably. His suit, which had always been impeccable, looked wrinkled and disheveled. "Hello, Carol," he greeted me as I sat down across from him. "Thanks for coming. Hello, Edward. How are you?" "Not great, to be honest." He ordered a black coffee. I ordered a latte. We sat in silence for a few minutes, studying each other like two strangers who had once been intimately acquainted. "You look good," he finally said. "Different, but good." "Thank you. I saw your picture in the paper, the article about your exhibition. I didn't know you had gone back to photography. There are a lot of things you didn't know about me, Edward. Just like I didn't know a lot of things about you." He nodded, staring into his coffee cup as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. "Carol, I came here to apologize." "Apologize for what, exactly?" "For everything. For how I treated you. For the things I said. For—" his voice broke slightly. "For being blind for so many years." "What happened, Edward?" He ran his hands through his hair, that gesture he made when he was nervous. "Sophia left me 3 months ago. She left me for another man, a younger entrepreneur. She told me the exact same things I said to you, that I wasn't attractive anymore, that she needed someone who could keep up with her ambitions. I felt a pang of something that wasn't satisfaction, but compassion. I'm sorry." "No, you're not. And you don't have to be. I brought this on myself." He looked up and met my eyes. "Carol, these past few months have been the worst of my life, not just because of Sophia, but because I understand what I lost with you." "Edward, let me finish, please." His voice trembled. "I've been living in a tiny apartment in Astoria. I come home every night to an empty place, with no one to ask how my day was, no one to care if I eat or not, no one to truly love me. You had that for 20 years. I know. And I threw it away like an idiot." He leaned forward. "Carol, I came here to ask you if there's any chance we could try again." The question I had both dreaded and, in a way, expected for months had finally arrived. I looked at this man who had been my husband, who had shared my bed for 2 decades, who had been the center of my universe for so long that I had forgotten who I was without him. "Edward, do you know when I realized our marriage was really over? When I called you disgusting? No. It was later. It was when I realized that for years I had been asking for permission to exist in my own life. When I understood that I had made my dreams so small they could fit into the spaces you didn't need." Edward looked down. "I can change, Carol. I've learned. I'm sure you have learned. Pain is a great teacher. But Edward, I've learned too. I've learned that I am a whole person without you. I've learned that I can be happy alone. I've learned that you can't build love on the ashes of lost respect. But we could start over, as 2 different people. We could, but we don't want to." "We don't want to?" "You don't want the woman I've become. You want the woman I was, the one who put your needs before her own, the one who had no life outside of you. And I never want to be that woman again." Edward was quiet for a long time. "Can I ask you something?" he finally said. "Of course. Are you happy?" The question surprised me with its simplicity. "Yes, Edward. I am happy. For the first time in many years, I am genuinely happy." "You don't miss me at all?" "I miss some things. I miss having someone to watch a movie with on a Sunday afternoon. I miss having someone to hold me when I have nightmares. I miss the companionship, but I don't miss you. I don't miss walking on eggshells, waiting for your approval. I don't miss feeling small next to your greatness. I don't miss being invisible in my own life. Carol, Edward, I wish you the best. I really do. I hope you find someone who makes you happy and that you can make them happy too. But it's not me. Not anymore." We said our goodbyes at the cafe door. Edward gave me an awkward hug, as if he wasn't quite sure how to touch me now that I was no longer his wife. "Take care, Carol." "You too, Edward." I watched him walk away down the street, his shoulders slumped, his hands in his pockets, and for a moment, I felt tenderness for him, but not pity, not regret, just tenderness for two people who had hurt each other because they hadn't known how to love each other well. A week later, the opening of my exhibition was an unexpected success. The gallery was filled with people, not just my friends from Tuscany and Elena's contacts, but people who had come specifically to see the photographs. Each portrait told a story of rebirth. Beatrice, the 70-year-old studying art. A pharmacist named Mary Jo, who had become a chef at 58. Rose, my artist friend from Santa Fe who now lived in a van traveling the country. At 8 o'clock, after I had been talking to visitors for 2 hours, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was my niece, Laura, my sister Susan's daughter. "Aunt Carol," she said, hugging me tightly. "Mom would be so proud to see you." "How did you find out?" "I saw the article, and I saw my dad at the cafe last week. He told me you met with Edward." "Your father was there?" "He was at the next table. He said he didn't want to interrupt, but he overheard part of the conversation." Laura smiled. "He said he's never seen you look so dignified." That night, when the gallery emptied and I was left alone cleaning up glasses and tidying brochures, Elena approached me. "Carol, I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "A lifestyle magazine called me. They want to do a feature on women who found their passion after 60. They'd like to include you. And what would I have to do?" "Tell your story. Not all the intimate details, but talk about how photography helped you rebuild yourself. It could inspire other women." That night, in my apartment, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine and the notebook where I had started writing The Dreams of Carol Vance, Part 2. The list had grown considerably in these months. Learn Italian, travel to Japan, make a photography book, teach workshops for older women. I thought of all the women who had come through the gallery that night, especially those who had approached me to say my story had given them hope. A 62-year-old woman had told me, "My husband left me last year for a younger woman. I thought my life was over, but seeing your photos, I think maybe it's just beginning." I wrote a new entry in my journal. "Dear Edward of the past, thank you for calling me disgusting. Without that cruel phrase, I would never have discovered that I am beautiful. Thank you for planning to steal my house. Without that betrayal, I would never have learned to fight for myself. Thank you for leaving me. Without you leaving, I would never have found myself." Signed, Carol Vance, 64 years old, photographer, traveler, free woman. I closed the notebook and looked at the lights of the city stretching to the horizon. Tomorrow, I would have to decide whether to accept the magazine's proposal. Tomorrow, I would have to continue building this new life I had designed from scratch. But tonight, I just wanted to enjoy something it had taken 64 years to achieve. The peace of knowing I was worthy, that I deserved love and respect, and that I would never again accept less than I was due. The wind gently moved the curtains on my balcony, bringing the scent of jasmine from a nearby park. Somewhere in the city, Edward was probably having dinner alone in his small apartment, lamenting what he had lost. Somewhere, Sophia was with her new love, repeating patterns that might one day lead her to the same awakening I'd had. But I was here, on my balcony, in my new life, surrounded by infinite possibilities. And for the first time in decades, that was more than enough. It was perfect. Have you ever experienced something like this? Or do you know someone who has gone through a similar experience? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who needs to hear it today.